Hi, everybody, and welcome to this Friday night's edition of The Lounge, where things are going to get kind of deep tonight. We're in a full moon, and the energy is strong. Today was a little bit more energized, and tonight is a little bit deeper, a little bit more reflective. And I don't know about you, but I am feeling it deep. Like it's just like, whoo, it's hard to work it through. So I'm going to try to be energized for you guys. Going to try to keep it upbeat, but we're, sometimes we tackle funny topics here. We talk about entertainment, we laugh, we joke around. But this topic of empathic mastery is something that is near and dear to my heart. And I can't wait to welcome Jennifer Moore, author and mentor. And she is a teacher, a master teacher at EFT International. And she really believes that we have to master the highly sensitive people, which a lot of you that listen to this are highly sensitive. I'm highly sensitive. I've been doing my work for 23 years. And I was just talking to Jennifer backstage, talking about how I can work on my own vibration, heightening and lowering and cleansing and releasing, but I cannot seem to master. And the more and more I get refined within my body, mind, and spirit, the clearer I get, the more I feel people's stuff. And it's something that's extremely frustrating, because if you're close to people, especially your family, friends, spouses, children, whatever, and they are upset, you feel it. Like there's no, it's like, I can go 500 miles away. And if somebody is upset and down or depressed or angry, and it has to do with me, I can feel it. So there, for me, doesn't seem to be a protective feel. And I mean, we could talk about, calling upon the archangels and putting the white light around us. Believe me, I've tried it all. And for me, you guys know I talk about healing. You guys know I talk about trauma a lot. You guys know I talk about, PTSD, and you guys know I talk about your healing work and doing your healing work. And really, most of us highly sensitive people are out of our bodies most of the time. We are disconnected. We are not in our bodies. We are not connected to our somatic sensations. And so when I feel like I'm connected to my body and back in my body, and I feel my spirit more at my solar plexus, where it's usually not, I'm more comfortable out of my body as a medium. I'm more comfortable not being in my body. It's not as comfortable for me to experience this world, not outside of myself. So a lot of highly sensitive people don't realize, even if they're not a psychic or a medium, that they are not connected to their bodies. So I don't know if this is what Jennifer is going to get into, but I know for me, doing that work on my own is helping me to stay grounded a little bit more. However, I'm still feeling everybody else's stuff, not just people that are close to me, but people that I haven't talked to in a while that might be thinking of me. I could pick that up, but also the world energy, because I channel and give weekly and monthly forecasts. I'm tuning into the world energy. I'm not only tuning into the world energy, I'm tuning into the earth energy, not just the United States, not just other countries, but space and the earth, the higher dimensions. And I'm also connecting to the spirits that want to come through on the other side. Now, I believe that I am a gated community. So I've asked a long time ago to be protected. And so, believe it or not, I could shut the other side off if I need to and not be bombarded. But I feel like I'm gated and I have beings around that are doing that for me. But as far as the earth plane, haven't been able to shut off that yet. So I'm sure some of you could relate. I'd like to say hi to a couple people. Early birds, Paula, nice to see you. Michael, good to see you. I know you're an empath, Michael. And Valeria, nice to see you too. So without further ado, I would love to welcome Jennifer Moore. I'm just going to read you a little bit about her real quick. Jennifer Moore is the author of Empathic Mastery. Just the title alone makes me want to talk to her. An intuitive mentor and master trainer for EFT International. That's emotional freedom technique, if people aren't aware of that. She helps empaths, creatives, and light workers to control the empathic overwhelm that keeps them stuck and harness their abilities to manifest their deepest heart's desires. Now, when we pull her up and say hello, I'm going to go over the 5 things that she's going to talk about tonight. And let me tell you, when I get number 4, that's what I want to know about. All right. So I'm going to go over those real quick, and then we're going to interview Jennifer. So without further ado, hi, Jennifer. How are you?
Oh, hi, Marissa. I'm very well, and I'm so excited to be here.
Well, I'm excited to have you. We see your book in the background. It's a lovely cover.
Thank you.
Did you design that yourself?
I did design that myself. I have a background as a fine artist, and graphic design is near and dear to my heart. Yeah.
Now, why do most empaths and psychics and mediums have artistic? That's the question. Do you have the answer to that? Why do we all have like an artistic graphic design sense? I don't know.
I would say, I don't know if artistic graphic design, like visual, but I think that there's a certain correlation between when we're highly sensitive, creativity flows from that we are picking up on and able to receive so much information and so much stimulation, and that it's sort of a natural response is to express it through creativity. And so it's a wonderful, I think it is an outlet that allows us to release some of the stuff that's coming in. So I think that, I guess that would be my sort of short, sweet answer, is because we're so sensitive and we pick up so much stimulation, we have more to offer or put back out into the world.
Yeah. And I know for the majority of my career, when I was really building my career as a medium, before I was professionally doing the mediumship, I was a photography major. I was a fine arts major. Most mediums, believe it or not, I found out are into photography, but into the visual arts. And I stopped doing all that when I was really focusing full time on my mediumship practice for so many years. And it created such a void in me because I was giving out. And that creative energy was not refilling my spirit. So I was left with like basically an empty vessel for a long time, not realizing why I was so drained. But having that creative outlet, I think, really does help.
Yes.
So I wanted to go over, well, first of all, could you bring up your book behind you and read the little blurb underneath it? What does that say underneath your book there?
The blurb on there basically says a 5-step system to go from emotional hot mess to thriving success.
I love that, because we're all hot messes around here.
We are all hot messes.
Especially during the pandemic, right? Feeling all of that energy. And you know what?
There goes
I was better in the pandemic than I was, because the world shut down, and I finally felt like I didn't feel the world around me. It was an amazing experience for me as a sensitive person to feel the world shut down. It was a beautiful thing. It
was such a relief. And I will say that this has been a conversation that I've had with so many of the people I work with, is what a relief it has been to have boundaries, like really solid boundaries about our time and our space, and not having to be out in the world and not having to do all the things. And one of the things that I have been hearing again and again and again is, how do I hold on to this hard-won sense of safety, this hard-won sense of privacy, this hard-won sense of not feeling like I have to do all the things and be all the things for everybody now that the world is opening back up. And I think that it's really incredibly important that we are mindful of what do we want to create now as we go, as we're sort of stepping across the threshold to a new chapter in this country and in other countries as well, and not just find ourselves backpedaling into the hectic life that we were living before. Because I have a theory, which is that we can set boundaries in healthy ways or we can set boundaries in unhealthy ways. And I personally believe that COVID was a crisis that was created for our whole planet because we've been sort of going in the wrong direction, and that we really do need to change our behavior and set limits and set boundaries. And what I saw for so many people was that COVID became an excuse for boundaries or an opportunity to set boundaries. And yet, if we can't set these boundaries consciously and deliberately, and if we cannot say no, then we will find ways, the universe will have a funny way of setting the limits for us. And I know for myself, I have had so many times where either an accident or locking myself out of my car, running out of gas, getting sick, illness has been a boundary setter for me. And I know for myself, I would much, much rather be deliberate and conscious in my boundary setting than necessarily sort of letting the universe decide how the boundaries are going to be set.
Right.
Yeah.
So I was talking about this before I actually brought you on tonight about, I have this question, and I posed this question in the beginning when I was doing the introduction. I can't figure out how to shut off feeling other people's stuff. I've done it all. I've done I have seen shamans. I've gone to light workers. Over the years, it's almost a 25-year career. And it seems like the more I do my internal work, the more I'm feeling other people. Does this book address this question?
Yes.
What do you have to say about this?
30
What's
years.
the answer?
30 years of dealing with picking up all the thoughts, feelings, and energy that are coming from the world around us. So this is obviously, or maybe it's not obvious, but there isn't a fast, short, easy answer to this question. It's not like we just get to take a pill or wave a magic wand and suddenly it's all different. But the first thing that I want to say is that one of the things that I have found again and again and again that is really, there's two things that I see as a major problem within sort of the general spiritual world for highly sensitive empathic people. The first thing is that most of the information that's out there is teaching us how to open up and how to receive information. It is not teaching us how to protect ourselves. It is not teaching us how to discern what's mine and what's not mine. And it's basically, so for empaths who are starting to take classes on channeling and spiritual development and all that, it's like we're basically opening up the floodgates when we're already getting too much information.
Right.
So, where a person who might not be as sensitive, some of these classes are absolutely amazing about learning how to develop your intuition and open up. But if you're already wide open, opening more does not do the trick. The second thing is that most of the advice that I've seen over the years is this idea of sort of bubble up, call on your guides and angels for help and support, put up a ball of light around yourself and you'll be fine. Here's the thing. If you have already taken on and absorbed the negativity, the thoughts, the feelings, the suffering, the pain that is coming from the world around you, you're like a dirty sponge. And the way that I think of it is that it's sort of like a bathtub where, the water is already filled and saturated with stuff. And if you pull the shower curtain around the bathtub, but you don't drain it, all you're going to have is a stinky bathtub with a shower curtain around it, but it's not going to protect. And the problem that I see is that a ball of light around ourselves when we are already saturated with other people's stuff is not going to protect us for two reasons. One is because we're just already carrying around a bunch of stuff, but also that interior energy that we're carrying and we've picked up on is going to weaken our filters and shields and basically prevent them from really being able to stop stuff from coming in. And so that's one thing that I have found is that, people put protection as like a lot of people put protection as the first step. I actually discovered over the years that there are a couple steps before we get to protection. And so that's why this is a 5-step system. And the first step is recognize. We actually have to start recognizing what's mine, what's not mine. And if we are, we're feeling out of sorts, we're feeling out of balance, we're feeling like, why am I suddenly feeling so blue and distressed? Being able to go, oh, this is not mine, and offer it back to the other person is such an incredibly important part of it. Then, for me, the second step in this system is release, which
Oh,
has
wait,
to do with,
I'm putting a banner up for your step one.
oh,
Here, what's
great.
mine
Yeah.
and not mine?
Yeah. So
Okay, that's
step
your
one is
step one.
recognize. Yeah.
But
And
what
what's
if you
mine,
can't?
what's not mine.
What if you think you're just like, you're sitting here, like I'm sitting here tonight, and all of a sudden I get really depressed, and I'm happy 5 minutes before. How do I know when I was happy, is that somebody else's, or when I'm depressed, is that somebody else's? Is that mine? Where, like, how do you, or like you're in a room with somebody and you feel anxiety. Is that yours, or is it the other person's? Like, or is their anxiety triggering your anxiety? Like,
Exactly.
sometimes I don't know what's mine. I don't even know like what I have to shut myself off and put myself in the middle of a lake in the middle of water to be able to tell you, like, oh, I'm clear. There's nothing around me right now.
Right.
You know what I mean? So how do you, if you're really doing this, like I'm doing it full time, you're really sensitive, you're a medium, you're empathic, you may not be doing it professionally. How do I know what's really mine? How do I know?
That is such an incredibly good question. So I think that first off, in terms of recognize, it's one of the biggest chapters in the book. And I have a lot of questions and a lot of charts. And to answer, you spoke about, what if it's that I'm actually, not only I'm picking up on the stress that somebody else is feeling and it's triggering mine. It's like, it's not fast and easy answer of like, it's always another person's, or always my stuff. Half the time, or more than half the time, part of it is my stuff, part of it is their stuff. And part of the reason why I believe we can get so agitated and distressed by things is because often it triggers the wounds that we're carrying around inside of us.
Exactly.
So there's this incredible dance. But what I'll say is that a couple of things I've noticed over the years is that, for one thing, in my experience, empathic overwhelm and empathic distress usually has a way of kind of coming out of the blue, or arising without there being necessarily any clear, conscious reason why I'm suddenly feeling this way. So, like, if I'm having a day and I'm feeling happy and content and just enjoying the day, and then suddenly I start feeling this uneasiness and this sense of distress or this sense of worry, I will usually, unless I'll sort of think through and go, okay, so what's going on here? What's really going on here? What have you done in the last 24 hours? And I'll sort of run through sort of the physical, the emotional, the mental, and then the sort of energetic. So on a physical level, I'll start evaluating. I'll be like, have I been exposed to EMFs? Have I eaten something that set my system off? Have I inhaled something? Have I been, in the environment? Have I come into contact with mold or some other kind of environmental toxin that could set off my already sensitive system? So that's sort of the first question, is what physical things have I been doing or encountering that could be affecting me? Then I will evaluate, like, who have I been around? What have I been around? What kinds of stuff, did I watch a program on the news or something?
That's a lot to think about. That's a lot.
It is a lot to think about. It really is. That there's a lot of sort of detective work that goes into this first step of recognizing what's mine and not mine, and then just thinking about, like, is that those emotional connections with other people. What am I picking? Did I pick something up that was going on? I've had the experience a number of times, and I imagine you have too, being at large events and conferences where suddenly I'll start to feel really weird and kind of insecure. I might even start feeling sort of competitive and snarky. And it took me a couple times going to events like this to realize this is not my stuff. I just happen to be picking up on what's going on with a lot of people who are probably experiencing a great deal of insecurity and paranoia. But it's definitely an interesting thing how I think often as empaths, we tend to, almost our default tends to be this idea that we are feeling something, when I think a lot of the time it's actually that we're sensing something, not necessarily that we're feeling something. So,
Okay.
Yeah. So to finish just talking about the 5 steps, there's recognize, which is the first step. Release is the second step.
Okay. Let me put the banner up for this. We could talk about this. Just release. That's the second step here?
Yeah. Letting all that stuff go.
All right.
And I know that's a really tall order, and that's where, for me, using EFT, emotional freedom techniques, and tapping has been truly life-changing and really, truly, truly just remarkable in terms of not having to continue to carry around absolutely everybody else's distress all the time.
Okay. Well, how do you get to the point where you just are an observer and you don't feel it at all? You just don't feel it. You just could watch somebody having their thing, and you could be like in this place of observing, and you retain the clear body state of mind in your somatic field.
So in my experience, this has to do not necessarily with not feeling anything at all, but has a lot to do with how do I hold space for discomfort?
Yes.
And what I will say is that in my personal experience, the more comfortable I have become with my own distress and my own discomfort, the more capable I am of holding space for other people's distress and discomfort.
Holding space, yes. Because a lot of people will just avoid, they'll walk away, they'll leave because they don't want to tolerate somebody else's emotional.
And we as empaths feel better when other people feel better. And so we have a chronic history of wanting to rush in and rescue. And if we're not comfortable with discomfort, if misery really just sets off all of our bells and whistles, then we're going to immediately feel a sense of urgency. We're going to immediately feel a desire to fix it.
Yeah, or to make somebody change their vibe so we can be comfortable.
So we can be comfortable.
Selfish thing. Yeah.
And the thing is, it's completely understandable. I hate the term codependent in the sense, when people talk about empaths being codependent, because I just sort of feel like it's so understandable, so completely understandable that we would want other people to feel better because we feel better when other people feel better. When the room, everybody's happy, we're not picking it all up. And yet, what I will say is that in the same way, if you've ever had a baby where they're just colicky and fretting and absolutely miserable, and their crying is just kind of getting into your energy system and it's getting you agitated. If you've ever had one of those experiences where you kind of sunk into it and just got into that core of stillness within yourself and just accepted that baby was absolutely miserable, there's this way that just like that settling, that going into that core of stillness and acceptance of the fact that this person is in a state of distress, I find allows me to let it flow through me as opposed to come in, like hold on to me. So what I would say is, my experience is not that you suddenly become this neutral, cold, like glass wall between you and the world. What I find is that it's more about, instead of reacting to the distress and becoming more and more agitated and urgent myself, that it's more about I'm moving from a place of profound compassion, and I am in a place where I am aware of the emotions, but they're flowing around me, as opposed to I'm just taking them in and absorbing them and trying to process them for people.
Trying to get away and trying to move away, especially when you have to hold space for somebody and the emotions are intense.
Yes.
A lot of people sometimes you talk about that dance, and there's, the person acts a certain way, then the other person reacts, and then there's reaction there, and that escalates to the point of like, and yet both people are looking like the person who's having that experience is just looking for love, just looking for nurturing, just looking for somebody to step toward them rather than get angry at them or walk away from them or leave. It's kind of like, then it sets off that other person's issues. Like you said, their trauma issues, their abandonment issues, whatever that is. So wait, are we still on release, or are we on something else here?
I think we're still on release, because we're talking
Okay.
about, we are really talking about, that dance between another person's feelings and our own feelings, and that ability to release all of that distress. And, I do really think that some of it is also about that capacity to recognize, because this is another thing that I have found, is that there is a difference between honoring pain and acknowledging pain with compassion and processing it for other people. And one of the things that I have found is that so many of us who identify as highly sensitive and empathic people, we're often the designated feeler in our family. And that I cannot even begin to count the number of times my clients and people who I've worked, encountered and worked with over the years have said essentially some version of being told from the time they were tiny, you're overreacting, you're being too sensitive, you're taking it too personally, you're making too big a deal out of it, you're just being crazy, stop worrying about it. All of these kinds of things.
Like invalidating your experience.
And gaslighting. But more often than not, it's because the family members were not able to own their feelings. They were not able to deal with their trauma. They were not dealing with their distress. And so empaths so frequently started from, knee-high to a grasshopper, feeling the feelings for the whole system. And having a lot of people also basically saying, I'm not feeling this way. You're crazy. You're making shit up. When the truth is the empath is picking up what's really going on. And so I think that part of our work as adults is about really learning how to dismantle this role and this identity as the designated feeler and the person who is processing emotions for other people. And that learning how to be able to say, oh, all of a sudden, out of the blue, I'm feeling this anger, or I'm feeling this fear, or I'm feeling this sadness. I'm imagining that this is coming from someplace outside of myself. And then instead of, it's sort of like there's almost a way that we can then, at that very moment of awareness, we can either kind of go in and pick at the scab and kind of double down on the feeling, or we can sort of take a bit more of a step back from it and sort of just acknowledge it from more of a kind of mindfulness place and look at it and be like, wow, that is definitely some distress. Like how, yup, it's uncomfortable. Let's just sit here and breathe and see what's see what this is about.
Let me just kind of take this on another angle, because I agree with you on that respect. But then I also have noticed that if empaths are in that process of fixing and repairing others and saving and being that fixer, when they start doing their own healing work and when their activation is minimized and when they start coming down and not doing that, sometimes that grief, anger, and sadness suddenly comes up because their activation is minimized. You know what I'm saying? So then you're like, well, okay, I figured out when it wasn't me, but now, like, is it me? You know what I mean?
Yeah,
it's kind of like that when you do get into your inner work, and finally you are not trying to fix everybody else or save everybody else or emotionally take care of everyone else, then those distractions kind of go and that spotlight turns around on you. And then you get to a period of calm where you're like not feeling anything. And then all of a sudden, boom, the grief comes, boom, the anger comes. And then you're like, wait, I was just taught to think that these were other people. So how do you know the difference between when you're in the midst of a healing work or that dark night of the soul and you're feeling great and it comes up and it's like, oh, this is my grief I have to process or my anger, or you're in the midst of your healing work and you're feeling good, and somebody else's shit just comes in. Those two things, it's so hard to figure
It
out.
is so hard. It is so hard. And in my experience, and I'm just trying to think of like, this is one of those things where it's sort of like intuitively, I've been working with it for such a long time. There's certain things and I just kind of know the difference. But what I'm thinking about is, in terms of answering this question, what I find in general is that when it's my stuff, there's a visceral physical quality to it that is in my body, that I can feel it in my body, that I can
Okay.
feel, I can feel it take purchase in
Thematically.
my body. I
Yeah.
also, more often than not, have some glimmer of a memory, some glimmer of an association or a thought, that there's usually some piece of detail that's connected to it, that there's some kind of quality to it. And as you were saying before, or we were saying before, like 9 times out of 10, it's both. It's not just I'm picking up on that other person's feelings and it has nothing to do with me. Most of the time, it's that I've got my stuff, they've got their stuff, and they're kind of doing this dance together. But I couldn't agree with you more about when we start doing our work, and especially if we've been using our rescue abilities to avoid feeling our own feelings, and we've been sort of staying out of the deep end of our own personal pool, that when we start going in there, I think grief is probably the thing that we avoid the most. I actually think that fear and anger are things we're generally a little bit more comfortable with than grief. But what I find is that grief is so frequently at the bottom of all of it, and that it is, we just don't live in a culture that ever taught us how to grieve. One of the things I've been saying for years now is, when in doubt, grieve, because I think that more often than not, it's our resistance to grief that just keeps us spinning our wheels and just doing all kinds of stuff. So I just wanted to agree with you, or sound in and say, absolutely. We start doing our work, and the grief and the stuff that we've not looked at, it comes up. So, I guess the other piece of it is that I'm also a believer that whether it's mine or whether it's coming from outside of me, I'm going to engage in a dialogue with it, and I'm going to sit with it, and I'm going to see what it has to say to me. And I will get something from that experience, regardless of whether it's that I'm picking up on the world around me or that I'm picking up on something inside of me. If I sort of enter into a dialogue with it, I will get, there's going to be some payoff from that. There's going to be something to come from it. And usually by having a dialogue with it, I can then start sorting out, oh, this is about that conversation I had with my brother 2 hours ago where he was expressing distress about something, versus, oh, this is because I just said something that totally just, flummoxed me, within myself.
Awesome. So I really appreciate that response, especially saying like you're going to have a memory and you're going to feel it in your body, which I could totally relate to. And that does kind of separate it.
Yeah.
So as far as release goes, because I want to get to step 3, EFT is a good way to do that. Are there other ways that you could recommend?
It's so individual and so personal. What I would say is that movement, somatic action, yoga, and I would say especially like trauma-informed yoga, dance, Gabriel Roth did the 5 rhythms and the whole idea of moving through the cycles of things as a way to express ourselves, as a way to move through things, deliberate mindful breathing and walking, even like singing, just all kinds of, going out and smashing plates, doing things. If you're ever in a situation, if you've never done this before, if you're ever in a situation where you are just just ready to let it rip, go to the local Goodwill, or someplace where you can get, or even, glass, saving bottles and glass, but just like having a chance to either shatter glass or old plates and things like that can be an obviously with safety glasses, but can be an incredibly satisfying way to release a lot of energy. So, there are so many, and like emotion code is another technique or another tool that I personally use, that using magnets and using magnets and muscle testing to determine what's going on, where's something coming from, why is it here? And there are just so many. I mean, it's amazing how many techniques we have now when it comes to energy healing and releasing stuff that we don't need to be carrying around anymore. And
Yeah,
I'm a real big fan of the combination of breathing, tapping, and also, like just as you were saying, jumping into water, taking a bath, jumping into the shower and letting all of that extra stuff just wash off of us, going for a walk and letting all that extra energy, if we can, walking barefoot and letting all that extra energy just like drain through our bodies and go down into the earth and releasing it. Going into the bathroom if you've got a second and putting your hands under the water and just like deliberately, consciously thinking about, okay, I'm carrying around a lot of extra stuff. I'm just going to release this. As well as,
awesome.
yeah, breathing in. One of the simplest things we can do, breathe in calmness and exhale out any tension or worry. And we get better and
yin
better at
yoga
that.
is, I really like yin yoga for restorative yoga, for release at night. At nighttime is a great time to release. So I got to because we only have an hour, so I have to get to step 3.
Step 3.
What is step 3?
So step 3 is when we get to protect. After we have recognized what's going on and what's ours and what's not ours, and after we have released the stuff that is no longer serving us, then we get to go into protect. Then we get to start to put up the effective filters and shields that are going to stop the energy from bombarding us. Then we also get to set up strategic boundaries, because protection is not just about having a bubble of light up around us and having our archangels surrounding us and protecting us and having ancestors who have got our back keeping an eye on us. Although all of those things are really, really important. It's also about being mindful of our time, our money, our energy, our resources, our choices, and making choices that protect our energy. So not only do we have to protect—
to step in. I have to, because I'm going to forget if I don't.
Okay,
You
go.
just spark something.
Yeah.
I think a lot of us think that protecting our energy field is a mental process, and you're saying it's an action. It's an action on all other areas of your life. It's protecting yourself where, you need to put your phone on do not disturb because you're tired and you want to take a nap. You know what I mean? But it's just the light bulb just went off. Like, wait a second. This is not just about calling on the archangels. This is not about the bubble. This is about protecting your energy in the physical world by action.
Ding,
Wow.
ding, ding, ding.
Wow.
During COVID, when we were at the height of COVID, and I was like, I was getting the downloads, my ears, the ringing ears, the whole 9 yards. And I was experiencing the surges. As we'd have surges and we'd have more waves coming through, I would be awakened in the middle of the night with these crazy surges. And I just got to the point where there was so much energy and stimulation coming through. All I could watch was Good Witch. Like, I don't know if you've ever watched. I love Good Witch. It's really, really sweet, but it is one of the most, it's kind of like the instant Quaker Oats of like television programs. It's so benign. But I knew that I couldn't take any I had to be so mindful of all the stimulation. I was already overstimulated. I couldn't take on more. And I think that is the thing. Not only, and here's a thing that a lot of people don't talk about, that, I hate to be sort of Debbie Downer here and sort of deliver the bad news. But one of the other pieces of this is that our diet is dramatically important and really affects those of us who are highly sensitive and empathic. And in my experience, most of the empaths I've worked with, and certainly in my personal experience, sugar is lethal for empaths.
Mm.
Sugar really sends us off. And if somebody is self-medicating with sugar, is self-medicating with alcohol, is self-medicating with weed, is self-medicating with
Sugar and
cigarettes.
alcohol are the same. I mean,
Yeah,
alcohol
sugar
turns
and
to sugar.
alcohol, exactly.
Yeah.
Very interconnected.
Yeah.
But as long as we are self-medicating and self-soothing with these things, no amount of spiritual intervention is going to
Right.
stop the barrage of things coming at us. Because the problem with the substances in particular, and sugar and sugar, is that it basically compromises our filters and shields. And I can give you a kind of a real cool sort of explanation of this, which is that our bodies are kind of like an inner tube, in that we have our digestive system starts at our mouth and goes all the way down to our root. And basically, it's a tube that is like, my skin is, there's my outside skin, but then there's my inside skin, which goes all the way through. And so instead of thinking of ourselves as this unit with sort of an energy field outside, we've got kind of an energy field on the outside and an energy field on the inside. And the thing is that our intestines, our whole digestive system, is dramatically affected by the flora, the gut flora that lives inside of us. Sugar feeds the bad bugs, and when the bad bugs are growing in our body, it compromises the integrity, the resilience, the protectiveness of our entire digestive system.
Like candida yeast.
Like candida yeast, yes. And parasites can, like opportunistic parasites can come in, all kinds of stuff. And over time, what happens is this causes what's called leaky gut, and it breaks holes in our gut. And the thing is, our gut is our primitive brain. There's a reason why they say trust your gut. The relationship, the cells that are in our gut are the same as the cells that are in our brain. I don't remember where I read that or heard that, but I learned that a long time ago. And so there's a very, very deep correlation between our gut and our brain and our psychology. And so when we are eating and consuming things that blow holes, that physically compromise our gut health, we are, as above, so below, compromising our energy filters and shields as well. And the paradox is, most of these things feel like they give us some safety and give us a sense of protection for a short period of time. But what often happens is, over time, they really compromise our filters and shields.
Yeah. I mean, most of the people that I know that are recovering from alcohol addiction or dependence are the most intuitive and psychic people I've ever met in my entire life. Okay. Or drug addiction,
and the question is, like, sort of, what came first, the chicken or the egg? It's like, I think that in many cases, I don't know if I know a single person in recovery who isn't highly sensitive and empathic and very, very, very sensitive. And it's sort of like, well, of course, we're going to turn to these things because our society is not prepared. Like, we don't have anything set up for actually dealing with feelings. And often, as the designated emotional person, we're the canaries in the coal mine, but we're dealing with a world that's gaslighting us and telling us that, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain.
All right. Well, let's get to step 4, because I want to get through the steps and then get to some people. People probably like to ask you a few questions.
Awesome.
So, what is step 4?
So step 4 is, protect. The next step is connect, because the universe abhors a vacuum. And the thing is, after we've set up our filters and shields and we've done the strategic things we need to do to really shift, how we're living our life, then basically it's about connecting with a power greater than ourselves. It's about connecting with source. It's about aligning us so that we're not running around on battery packs. That's one of the things that I think is such a illusion of our time and our space. And I know the truth of things, that we're all one, that we're all interconnected, that we're all cells in the body of this planet. But, we've been living since at least the industrial age, we've been living in this illusion that we are separate, that we are individuals, that we are egos. And so as a result, I think that many of us sort of walk around trying to DIY our lives and living on our own steam and basically functioning from our own energy. And in order for us to truly sustain empathic mastery and really make a difference in our life, we need to stop trying to do it ourselves, and we need to find ourselves in right relation with the power, with something so much bigger than ourselves, so that we can defer to the divine, that we can turn it over to our higher power. And we also have the ability to recognize what's my job, what's not my job. Like, I'm very clear, I am not the person driving the bus. That's mom's job. Like, our blessed mother is in charge of that whole thing. And my job is to be in the back of the bus with my little bag of juice boxes, just handed it out to the littles and going, look at the scenery. Isn't that nice? It is not to be the person who decides how to get somewhere. So for me, Connect is all about recognizing that there is a source so much greater than us, that nourishes us, that provides for us, that is responsible for taking on the misery. Because that's another thing. If we're picking up the pain and we're aware of the suffering that somebody is going through, and we think we have to come up with a solution, that it's our job to fix it, when so often it is so much more, the magnitude is beyond anything one human being can do. When we truly cultivate our faith and we really develop that connection, then the natural thing we're going to do is turn it over to the divine and say, this is beyond my capacity. I offer this up to you. Please take this person's cancer journey for me. Please take this person's recovery journey from me. Please take this political situation, or just this world crisis from me. This is beyond me. So the third step is connect.
And what is I don't want to rush you through this, but we only have
no
about
problem.
10 more minutes.
Number 5 is act. So number 5 is act, which really goes back into being really mindful of how do we live our life in a different way. So for example, when we find that we're coming up against a person's pain and we're starting to pick up on it and we're starting to engage in it, and maybe we're noticing that part of us is like, oh my God, what did I do? Who did I piss off? Is like, it's my fault. That the act part is about that ability to say, when is it my job to help somebody? When is it my job to detach and like mind my own business? And actually, that was something that I also wanted to say, is that there is a point in my experience where many of us as empaths have the choice to either acknowledge pain and let it be on the outside of us, or probe it. And I think that because of safety, especially when empaths have grown up in challenging family systems, or had very difficult childhoods, pinging something or probing something or sort of psychically going and finding out what's going on was a matter of life and death. It was really about safety. The thing is that as adults, it is, and once we start learning how to pull back and go, I am not going into that. I've not been given permission to read this person's mind, and it is not appropriate for me to be reading this person's mind, to really make that decision to pull back. That, these are the kinds of things where ACT is really about the deliberate agreements and choices that we make about how to live in the world as a responsible empath, and how to live in the world so that we can use our gifts for good, as opposed to just taking on all the thoughts, feelings, and energy and amplifying it and actually contributing to the world, to the distress.
Mm-hmm. Now, what I found most interesting, I really liked in number 4 in your tips that you had sent me prior. You said, in order to hold space for somebody else's healing process, we must be comfortable with discomfort. When we are still carrying trauma and trapped emotions, which you were talking about, living in those complex family systems would obviously make us carry trauma and trapped emotions in our body and energy fields. Our distress is easily triggered by other people's issues. Our job as healers is to first do our own healing work. So I think it's so important to talk about each person in the system has to do their own work. It's just like, you can't do it, live in a dysfunctional system, and just expect to not be like attacked. I mean, even if you do your own work and you're comfortable with the discomfort and you're still around people that aren't doing their work, you're still it's still damaging to you if you're doing your work. Like, other people in the system have to also rise to the occasion and do their own work too.
Or not. I mean, sadly, sometimes we lose people. Sadly, there are times where, sadly, we have to detach. I mean, some people are just not going to do their work. Some people are constitutionally or cognitively incapable of recognizing their part. I've known people with personality disorders where it's always somebody else's fault. It's never, ever, ever, ever going to be anything they did. And they don't have the insight. They don't have the capacity to see things. And at this point, I am more inclined, I give them a wide berth. I have much more clear boundaries. I don't engage with the part of me that's trying to be a good girl or a nice girl or a people pleaser that is, uncomfortable with setting a boundary. And if I know that it comes down to my personal health and safety and pleasing somebody who's basically never going to be satisfied or never pleased, my job is to set that boundary, even if it's uncomfortable, even if it pisses them off, even if basically I get some pushback. Now, what I will say about this is that there are times where strategically we need to basically kind of suck it up and deal with stuff that is uncomfortable or sort of like people please or acquiesce for a little while to get ourselves out of harm's way. But once we are in a place where we are safe, where we have, like, I live in my house and those people live states away from me, and I make choices about when I see them. They are on Do Not Disturb on my phone. I don't just call them back immediately. If they call me, I let it go to voicemail and find out what kind of a crisis is this person in. And so I think that a lot of it is when it comes to the kinds of people who are not doing their work. I believe also that as long as we keep doing the heavy lifting, as long as we do that, the designated emotional sensor feeler person in the family system, that enables them to not do their work. So the more we detach,
when you're doing all the work and people aren't meeting you in any way on your, like, doing any work, so you can't. But I think as empaths throughout our life, we were used to doing all the work because that's what made us feel worthy, and that's what made us feel like people were pleased with us, even if just for the moment, and then they were not pleased again. It made us feel like that was our self-worth, was in.
And it's our family contract. In many places, it was part of the family contract, was that we were the ones who basically got to be regarded as the crazy ones, and the ones who were, but it was sort of this very interesting dance between we're doing the work, we're caring for them, we're worrying about them, we're meeting all of their needs, but at the same time, we're also getting gaslit because they're, because it's sort of like when it's inconvenient, they're like, no, pay no attention to the man behind the curtain. There's nothing going on here. And yet I really do think that in my experience, detachment is like, sometimes you just got to be like, wow, especially with people who, 20 years, they're complaining about the same thing over and over again. There is a certain point where I think all you can do is go, wow, that sounds really hard. I'm so sorry you're going through that. And just really kind of like, yeah, sucks to be you. Too bad that's going on. And I just, that may sound kind of heartless and certainly not particularly empathic, but what I have found is that in my experience, there are so many people on this planet who are ready to do the work, who are willing to do the work, and who want to do the work, who value the energy that we have to offer the world, that I want to spend all my time and as much of my time and energy connected to the people who are ready and willing to do the work. And I will have compassion for the people who are not, but I am not going to bend over backwards or try to get them to be something that they are either incapable of being or not ready for being. And I believe that by detaching, I'm not enabling their lack of processing by being the one who's doing the processing for them. It's sort of like, like some of those old Star Trek images where you had sort of like the more force that you put into something, the more energy the ship would get. And I really think that when it comes to people who are resisting their own stuff, the more energy or dance we do with their stuff, the less they have to engage with it. But the more we just sort of like drop it, kind of in that martial arts way of sort of like using leverage and just letting the gravity take over, that when we release that hold on their stuff, then they're the ones who are going to have to either, have that sort of come to Jesus moment with it where they have to deal with it, or they'll just keep kicking the can down the road and keep finding other people who will support them in staying stuck and basically enabling them.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer. That makes a lot of sense. We only have a few more minutes. We can't get to a lot of questions because we are almost at the hour, but I do want to tell people how to get to your book. So if you do want to get Empathic Mastery, you go to empathicmasterybook.com. I know that Paula here, she says, I'm so buying this book. I can get overwhelmed by the feeling of friends on Facebook. I know how that is. I don't even need to hear others, and it definitely triggers my emotions. That makes things worse. My heart absolutely races in crowds, make me feel like I'm going down a rabbit hole. Well, this book seems amazing for you, Paula. Angela says amazing. Stephanie, I didn't mind being shut down. I'm a nervous wreck with everything opening back up. Paula, I loved being shut down. Nice break from all the things. Awesome. Well, and Michael's saying decrease transparency with difficult people.
Yes,
Carol
Michael,
loves the show.
Totally.
Victoria had helped me to check in with other empathic friends, as they often are picking up on the outside stuff versus my own healing work.
Yes. So Victoria actually mentioned something that a lot of times, if you have a posse of empaths, it's really helpful. That's actually a really good tip. It's really helpful when you start picking up on you feel the rumble under your feet and like kind of like the distress of the universe. It's super helpful to check in with your empath posse and just go, hey, are you picking something up too? And so often you'll get like, oh yeah. And that can be so validating to recognize that it's not just about us.
Yeah. Look at it. Paula even says, tonight I learned how I ended up being my family's caregiver and mediator. So you did your job, Jennifer, tonight. Seriously. So Jennifer has a gift for listeners. If you guys want to get the Empathic Safety Guide, 3 Basics for Finding Calm in the Eye of the Storm, please go to empathicsensitivity.com. And back again, if you want to get the book, empathicmasterybook.com. And Jennifer Moore, author and mentor. We have to wind the show down now. I hate to stop the conversation. It was a wonderful conversation, Jennifer. Thank you so much for
Marisa,
being on tonight.
Such a pleasure. What an awesome conversation. And awesome. I love the questions you've been asking.
Great. Well, I can't wait to get into that book. I know it's in my mailbox now.
It is in your mailbox, yes.
It's in my mailbox, and I am going to read it. And then we will, once I get another round of questions, we will certainly love to have you back to delve deeper into the topic. So thank you so much for having me.
It will be absolutely wonderful to come back and talk some more.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks everybody tonight on the lounge. We will see you next week, and tune in to The Office next week. And if you are not on my monthly energy forecast, if you're not getting that, make sure you put your email in. That's in the description of this video. If you're on YouTube or Facebook, get in before the 15th of every month and you'll get my monthly energy forecast. And with that, I'm going to say good night, everyone. Have a wonderful night. Thank you, Jennifer.